The camera used was a Sinar P2 4x5-inch large format view camera fitted with a wide-angle 90mm lens. That's a 25mm equivalent on 35mm format cameras. The aperture was set to f16.5 for depth of field. Wanting a low angle to add a little more drama to the image, I mounted the camera on a tripod head bolted to a 38 by 51 centimeter sheet of plywood. This camera rig sat directly on the floor about 2.7 meters in front of the subjects, who were positioned 1 meter in front of the fireplace. I used Kodak Ektachrome 100 plus sheet film and rated it at 80 ISO. A 2400 watt strobe fitted with a 1.2 by 1.8 meter softbox was placed to the camera right side, the 1.8 meters in front of the subjects. I chose a large softbox to ensure that all the shadows created by it would be soft-edged. Soft-edged shadows draw less attention, and this was important to me since the light source was to be the fill source. I generally like the effect of my shadow fill to not draw too much attention away from the main light and accent lights. Since this light was closer to the foreground and further from the background, as well as closer to Santa than the kids, I pointed it up to feather light off the near floor area and rotated it a little towards the children away from Santa to even out their brightnesses. With these adjustments, the strobe power was altered to read f8 using an incident meter set to 80 ISO. The meter was positioned with its back against the subjects and the dome pointed at the softbox. This created a minus 2.5 fill. How was that calculated? Take the f8 reading and compare it to the camera exposure setting of f16.5. The difference, minus 2.5, is the ratio. To accent overly dark areas of importance, 3 800 watt-second monoblock strobes fitted with 18 centimeter parabolic reflectors with honeycomb grids installed were brought on set. 2 of these were accent lights using 20-degree grids and were placed 1.8 meters above the floor. They sat to the right and left sides of the set, 1.8 meters in front of the fireplace. They were directed to create pools of light around the candles on the mantelpiece. The third accent light, also sitting 1.8 meters above the floor, sported a 30-degree grid and was placed 1.2 meters to the right of Santa. It was in line with his front arm. This source accented his camera side as well as the inside of the book. The light striking the book from the accent light reflected off its white pages and back into his face, bringing out his features. You may wonder why I didn't just turn up the fill light if I was so concerned about some of these key frontal areas being too dark. Obviously, this would have been a much easier solution, but at the cost of the dark, cozy, firelit look. I prefer to use low-level fill light and then selectively brighten important secondary areas. This light source, measured with the instant meter at the subjects, read f16, making it minus half value. The main light was created with 2 100 watt-second off-camera flashes mounted to a piece of plywood and placed inside the fireplace. The flashes were rotated so that one was aimed towards Santa and the other towards the girls. With the aid of my incident meter positioned at the subjects and pointed towards the fireplace flashes, I set these lights to f22, which is half a stop above the camera aperture setting, making them a plus half value. Notice how the stray light spilling past the subjects bounces into the scene, increasing the shadow-filled brightness. To stop the fireplace flashes from nuking the image, a piece of black card was adhered to the center portion of a 61 centimeter square piece of clear window glass. To set this up, I first had to figure out where to place the glass. The distance of the glass to the camera would control how fuzzy, that is, how in focus or out of focus, the edges of the mask would be. The distance would also dictate the size of the glass needed. The glass sheet had to be at least big enough to cover the lens's full field of view, otherwise the glass edges would appear in the image. I wanted the mask a little out of focus to aid in making my fireplace exposure meld nicely into the subject exposure. The closer the mask is to the camera, the more out of focus it becomes, and the smaller the sheet of glass can be. The further the mask is from the camera, the more in focus it becomes and the bigger the glass needs to be. So finding that distance had to be judged while looking through the camera with the lens stopped down to shooting aperture in order to take into account the depth of field created by my f16.5 setting. I settled upon positioning the mask at 61 centimeters in front of the lens. Check out the slightly soft edge black rectangle over the fireplace. This mask area photographed pure black, making it the perfect canvas to set the fire upon. Word of warning though, nothing but dark surfaces like a black cloth or panel should sit behind the camera. Otherwise, you or lighter room objects will show up as reflections on the sheet of glass and will create ghosted image in the final capture. With the sheet of glass in place, it was time to prepare and install the actual mask. To create the perfect mask, I taped a sheet of clear acetate over the ground viewing glass on the back of the camera. Having already confirmed that the framing and the focus was to my liking, I traced out the fireplace rectangle on the acetate using an indelible ink pen. Next, 2 registration slugs were hot glued to the camera side face at the top of the glass. A large sheet of black paper was hole punched so that it could be held in position with 2 registration slugs. A bright light was shone through the ground glass acetate tracing on the back of the camera. This projected the tracing onto the black paper, covering the sheet of glass in front of the camera. Essentially, I had just turned the view camera into a projector. The projected image on the sheet of glass was the perfect size and dimension to block the fireplace flashes. No measuring, no math, no problem. Using a felt pen, I traced out the projected rectangle on the paper covering the glass, then cut it out. This black rectangular mask was placed back into the rectangular hole it was cut from and was held in place with double-sided tape. The large outer black paper was then removed, which left the floating black mask in place, ready to go. For the second exposure, this mask was removed to allow the flames to be photographed. If the mask needed to be used again, it was a simple matter to put back the large piece of black paper over the registration slugs, pop the mask back into the hole, and then remove the big sheet of black paper while leaving the mask in place. Now the fireplace flashes are perfectly hidden once again. The fire in the fireplace for the second part of the composite was created with crumpled newspaper and a little liquid fire starter. Obviously, the flashes were removed before adding and igniting the newspaper inside the fireplace. I settled on an exposure of 1 second to go with my f16.5 aperture. This made the brightest flames 3 stops brighter than the camera setting. This is a +3 ratio and was read with a 1 degree reflective spot meter. This is where digital really excels over film. You can shoot, chimp, and adjust until it looks right. Also with film, you don't really know when you've captured the best flame pattern since you have no instant preview. This and the two girls create a lot of variables to overcome, making me burn through lots of expensive sheet film to get the shot. So there's all the principles and procedures to create a fire-lit look. The procedure needs to be modified for mirrorless and digital SLR cameras or any camera that does not have a large optical preview ground glass or any direct way to access it. Start by viewing the fireplace using live view on the back of your camera or Wi-Fi to your smartphone. Let this image direct you in placing strips of tape directly onto the glass to map out the mask rectangle. Using the registration slugs again, place a sheet of white paper over the camera side of the sheet of glass. Backlight the glass so that you can see the tape show through the white paper. Trace out the tape rectangle onto the white paper and then cut it out. Remove the white paper and tape, install the black paper back onto the glass, then place the white paper over top of the black. Obviously, both the black paper and the white paper are hung correctly in place from the registration slugs. Trace out the hole in the white paper onto the black paper, then cut it out. Now you have your black mask as well as a hole in the larger outer black paper to place the mask correctly. A project like this can be pricey to execute if you don't use your imagination a little. I sourced the living room fireplace by asking friends and family. A friend of a friend agreed to let me take over half her house for a day in exchange for a portrait of her aging father. From my favorite acting agency, I found my Santa Claus in a white-haired actor named Noel. How's that for living up to your name? Noel was a professional Santa Claus and was absolutely perfect. He even showed up with his own Santa outfit, sack, and white whiskers. I did the shot with him as a collaborative business Christmas card promotion, so no actual fee was required. The children were provided by my sister in exchange for prints and some of the Christmas cards. As it turned out, the best image was the version we did at the end of the shoot on a whim. I swapped out the brunette child with my sister's younger daughter. It was fortuitous that she had been dragged along to the shoot rather than left at home with a babysitter. I hadn't thought to use her. I figured that sitting so long would be pretty hard for such a young child. As it turned out, she was absolutely enthralled by Santa. She was convinced that he was the real thing, and so sat there on the floor for a long time, staring at the God of gifts in complete wonder.